Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and we are continuing the Dynasty week, season, month, whatever the hell you want to call it, with a look at the ever-important quarterback position. Done a lot of research on this over the past few weeks. Age, experience. If mobile quarterbacks run less as they get older, we'll have a bunch of takeaways from that throughout the episode. But I have a very special guest to help me accomplish this goal. You know him. He's all over ESPN. Some of the best projections in the biz. Intros cannot do this man's service. Mike Clay at Mike Clay NFL, of course. Mike, thank you so much for the time, man. Your second appearance on the PFF Fantasy Pod. We appreciate you each and every time, my man.
Yeah, you say the second, but actually I was on the first one ever and many more after that. So I've been on hundreds of them back in the day when we started it, Jeff Ratcliffe and I. So yeah, I don't know if everyone knows that because I've been away from PFF for 5-6 years now, but I was there at the beginning, started the PFF fantasy department, and helped build it up along with my predecessor or my eventual replacement, Jeff Ratcliffe. So you guys are holding the torch well and doing way better than we ever did. I don't want to go back and watch the original shows because I can only imagine how awkward and uncomfortable they are. I still feel to this day like I'm getting my feet under me when I'm talking on pods and TV and all that fun stuff. It's
just wild. It's one of these things, man, where we can never truly be satisfied because there's always something new to learn about whether, presentation, football. And then just when you get complacent, I feel like I always say something stupid and then we got to start over from square one. But yes.
Plus, when you go to ESPN and you sit down next to the talent that's around you, it's super intimidating too, to be around an amazing host like Randy Scott and Field Yates and analysts like Matthew and Stefania, and the list goes on and on and on. And we have some incredible talent here. So that's even more intimidating. But all we can do is just talk about football. That's what I do.
Iron sharpens iron, my man. Yes. Second appearance since I've been privileged enough to
be a
member of PFF. Obviously, Mike's history speaks for itself. So again, everyone, main topic of today, we want to talk dynasty quarterbacks. Now, Mike and I actually delayed the start of this podcast thinking that Aaron Rodgers had something to get off his chest. He did not. So Rodgers saga aside, let's get things rolling. So Mike, I want to start off kind of bigger picture because dynasty, we're always looking at least 3, maybe sometimes even 5 to 10 years down the road. And just in terms of the age at these positions, in terms of when they're able to put forward top 12 seasons, 21% of fantasy QB1s over the past 10 years have been 35 years or older. And when I saw this chart, a lot of people were saying, oh, it's just a Tom Brady effect. And yeah, he has a bunch of those, believe me, but also Rodgers, Breeze, Big Ben, Matt Ryan, Peyton, Rivers, Romo. Age seems to be nothing but a number at the quarterback position. With that said, is there a point in dynasty we really start looking to sell sooner rather than later with some of these, more elderly quarterbacks, or just more of an eye test thing where it's like, when Peyton Manning's arm looks like it falls off in 2014, we kind of know the end is near?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the answer is no on selling them. And the reason is because no one wants them.
Yeah.
Fair. Who's trading for a quarterback in his mid-30s, and that's the truth of it. I mean, perceived value is so important, market value in dynasty. And if, people are down on a guy or they see an age they don't like, they're just not going to give you much. So there's just no sense in doing it. I haven't had much luck with that in the past, trading older quarterbacks. So you might as well just ride it out because the honest truth is they're probably going to last longer as fantasy relevant quarterbacks than you probably realize, as you just pointed out, and you're just not going to get much back. What are you going to trade? 3-4 years ago, are you going to trade Matt Ryan or Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers for a 3rd round pick? Or, maybe if Rodgers, you get a 2, something like that. But, people just, they see that age and they think, well, he maybe has 1 year left, maybe 2. I'm not going to, not to mention, by the way, we're in general not talking super flex, right? So one quarterback leagues, as people get smarter and smarter and smarter, which has been the case over the last decade, if there's only 12 starting quarterbacks in your fantasy league, people just aren't valuing the position high enough. It's just not worthwhile. So, honestly, no. If I usually don't have older quarterbacks, but if I do end up in that position, I'm just gonna ride it out.
It might be, I hear you, definitely not, we're not going to sell, for half the price that, they might be worth, and particularly if they're almost being undervalued as they get up. But if you are in a startup or something like that, and you decide to go, heavy, every other position to start, and you find yourself competitive, but needing, that ever important quarterback piece to complete the roster, maybe targeting some of these guys as, take a page out of the real NFL's playbook, get your mercenary quarterback, your Matthew Stafford for a year or two, because to your point, people just, in dynasty land, maybe at least that quarterback, we're putting almost too much stock into the age in today's NFL. I mean, they're not taking the same hits. And again, if the situation is right, I agree with you. We're not selling. Maybe if the situation is right, we could be buyers though.
Yeah, that's a 100% a fair point. And, someone like Aaron Rodgers, who's viewed, assuming he returns maybe for one more year, I mean, you might get him on the cheap, it might be a guy to go after if you have quarterback issues. Russell Wilson, injury plague season, maybe, you expect a bounce back. I know we're going to talk about him in a little bit, but a guy like that you could go after coming off a bit of a down year. So I'm with you from that standpoint. Those guys that are fringe or back end QB1s, that are up there. And if someone's, especially, the thing I always do in this situation is look for teams that have multiple good quarterbacks. That's they're willing to sell them cheaper. And especially in a situation like that, someone that's Justin Herbert and Aaron Rodgers, good guy to go, go after Rodgers.
There you go.
It's a good opportunity to go in and get him a little cheaper than you would for someone who only has one good quarterback.
Great points, Mike. And I know it's always a tough question. We get these on Twitter. It's like, oh, you buy, sell, or hold this guy. It depends every single time on what you can get in all those situations. So
for sure.
Mentioned in terms of experience, age, we see the most over the past 10 years, high-end quarterbacks come from 35 plus, 10 plus years in the NFL. Definitely some survivalship bias going on there. But interestingly, the other bucket of quarterbacks that we saw kind of spike up was second-year signal callers. Now, a lot of us were really high on these players last season. Obviously, none of them really kind of got that ceiling just yet. Saw some flashes from Justin Fields. Mac Jones obviously was a great real-life quarterback. But looking at that 2021 QB class in Dynasty Land, Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Justin Fields, Mac Jones, even Davis Mills. How would you rank them just against each other? And then how much did last regular season kind of change your opinion on the order, if at all?
Well, you kind of nailed it there with year two, right? I mean, there's a lot of really good quarterbacks that didn't do much out of the gate. Their efficiency tends to make a big leap from year 1 to 2. That's where you see the largest gain in production and efficiency. So I don't really worry too much about a rookie season unless it's unbelievably horrific or really, really good. Like Justin Herbert, I'm going to be higher on than other, last year I was higher on him than I would normally be a second-year quarterback for obvious reasons. He completely lit it up as a rookie. He looked like a star right away. You would expect that to continue. But again, if a guy is just okay or maybe below average for a rookie quarterback, not too worried about it. We've seen plenty of examples, including a guy like Matthew Stafford or even Peyton Manning, who made a gigantic leap in year number 2. Joe Burrow, even his efficiency wasn't so hot before he got injured last year, and he made a huge leap. So Josh Allen, another one, took a couple of years, but he picked it up. So, Trevor Lawrence was number 1 on my board going into last year. I stand by that. He's QB9 in my dynasty rankings. I have Lance net right after him at 10 and Fields right after him at an 11. I think that's the 3 guys. Obviously, Lance and Fields can do a ton with their legs. Fields, his last 4 full games, all top 12. So we started to see that.
He got hurt right when he was starting to come on, man.
Right.
So frustrating.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I still believe in Trey Lance, especially in that scheme with Shanahan. So, and plus he doesn't have to throw it great, so
right.
He's running it. We're happy. So I have those 3 together. A little bit of a step down to Zach Wilson. I'm on the fence with him. I want to love him. You see some of the flash plays, you see how he finished up last year, but man, his efficiency was really, really poor last year in the first and second half, honestly. So he had the flash plays. The Jets offense was scoring 2+ touchdowns pretty much every game, which I don't think many people realize, which is good, but little down a little bit on him. Obviously he can run a little bit, but not quite to the extent of a Fields or a Lance. And then Mac Jones, again, pocket quarterback. I just worry about his ceiling. There's a handful of guys like that just don't run enough. So, and he's older than these guys too, by about, 1 to 2 years. So, have him at 17 for the moment. And by the way, Davis Mills, quick mention, again, almost 24. I don't view him as a future, franchise quarterback. In fact, they might be looking elsewhere this year. I don't think so based on the assets they have, the situation they're in, the available quarterbacks, but Mills is a guy that's way down my board. I'm rooting for him, but from a dynasty perspective, not too interested.
I think Jets fans will like the kind of analysis you gave on Zach Wilson, because it did seem, I can see what they were saying, where, Lawrence is having a terrible year, Wilson's having a terrible year, but only kind of one of them was getting the benefit of the doubt moving forward. And Wilson, if you just look at his big time throws throughout the year, I mean, my God, some of the things he pulled off in that Titans game, he did finish strong. So maybe he could get going. But I saw this fantastic quote from Patrick Daugherty, Roto Pat, always been doing great stuff at Roto World, NBC Sports for a long time, where his definition for Zach Wilson was a potential dual threat who needs to establish a single threat first, which I think is very fair at this point in his career. But yeah, man. And then I know we're talking dynasty, but just in terms of these valuations, going into next year, one or two of these guys are going to pop off. We're all expecting it to be Fields and Lance, but where they're being priced right now, man, Lawrence and Wilson, just that discount that's available, certainly wouldn't discount either guy making a nice leap here in 2022. But,
and the answer of who to pick might be whoever goes later in drafts, right? But that you should definitely have those lists of quarterbacks on your watch list late in your draft, right? That's where I grabbed Joe Burrow last year. That's where you want to be looking. That's where we grabbed Patrick Mahomes a few years ago. Those late round picks are meant for those second year quarterbacks who can make that big leap. And Lawrence, Lance, Fields, Wilson, maybe Jones. Again, I'm worried about his ceiling, but maybe Jones. That's who you're looking at in the late rounds.
Mahomes, Lamar, Kyler had a good rookie year too. And then Jalen Hurts last year. There's one a year. We got about 6 more months to figure out exactly who that is going to be. All right. We got Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, pretty much a consensus QB1, QB2 in Dynasty land. Who is your overall QB3? I got Justin Herbert right now, but again, I think there are a couple more guys you can make the argument for.
Yeah, I think you could, but it was an easy call for me. I'm with you. Yeah. Justin Herbert, off to a slow start. You remember he came out of the gate pretty slow. He only had before their bye week, only 2 weekly finishes better than 12th. He had the 2 huge games, but came out, had a bunch of finishes outside the top 20, even toward midseason, same kind of thing, right? Very, very boom bust. And then that kind of went away. Their second half of the season, he was right back to just putting 20, 25 points up every single week and was rolling, ended up QB2 for the season. So at his age to be doing that damage already is super impressive. I'm in on Herbert. He's the, QB2 last year, very easily could lead the position in fantasy points this year. So again, kind of an easy call. I know there's some serious talent in that range with Kyler and Lamar.
Right.
But for me, it was an easy call. And Justin Herbert, just 24 years old. The guy is a superstar.
I've said in this podcast many times, I'm sure my listeners are sick of it, but we don't necessarily care about style points in fantasy football. All yards are created equal. But my God, some of these things Justin Herbert is able to do out there, hard not to just be completely blown away. Your pinned tweet right now, incredibly helpful. It's your first edition of the 2022 unrestricted free agency cheat sheet. And if you start digging around the Chargers, man, they have all sorts of cap room. But Mike Williams is a free agent. Jalen Guyton, exclusive rights free agent. I believe he might even be there's a chance Jalen Guyton's gone. Either way, all three tight ends and Parham, Cook, and Steven Anderson are potential outs as well. Is there someone other than Keenan Allen really in this Chargers offense? I know, we're sticking to quarterbacks, but kind of looking more at the wide receivers. Someone you'd like to see come in, or do you think maybe someone like Josh Palmer could actually be on the rise here? Because again, we know how great Justin Herbert is. Keenan Allen's going to get his. And I guess Austin Eckler too, but there should be enough, passing volume in this offense to enable another guy, whether he's already on the roster or not.
Yeah, so I think I hope that the Chargers learned a little bit from the Bengals last season, right? And when they bring in Jamar Chase and don't be like, okay, we have T. Higgins and we have Joe Mixon and we have Tyler Boyd, we're good. He's enough weapons. No, if you have a chance to get another super impact player, that can make all the difference. And it did for the Bengals. Yeah. And I think it would for the Chargers, whose O-line, I can't believe I'm saying this, their O-line is actually in decent shape relative to where it's been in years past.
First time in a decade.
Yeah, right. And relative to where the Bengals were last year. So they could still use work there, don't get me wrong, but they have some pieces in place. And I think they can afford to go after a big time player. And they should, because right now, like you said, you have Keenan Allen, you have Austin Eckler, and then you have question marks, right? That's pretty much it. And Allen turns 30 this season, or this year. So definitely need to get aggressive offensively. You mentioned, is there a name? And it's the obvious one, of course, right? It's a day two pick from last year. Josh Palmer flashed this past year. He's actually a similar frame to Keenan Allen, but plays more on the perimeter. He can play inside a little bit, but he'd be on the perimeter with Keenan Allen inside most likely this season. But I saw enough from him to think he can make that leap in year number 2. But of course, the question is, do they re-sign Mike Williams, or Do they spend, they spend an early pick on one of these impact wide receivers, these rookie receivers, or do they go out or do they go out and get an impact tight end as well? Because right now, like you said, it's Parham and it's Trey McKitty, who was a third rounder last year. So we'll see what they do. But for now, Palmer's the guy you would expect to make a leap, but still some questions to be answered.
Definitely one of the key situations to keep an eye on. And Palmer is still kind of carrying a fairly, wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 ADP in Dynasty land. And like worst case, he's going to be out there in 3 wide receiver sets. I think he's a prime example of someone that really is being priced near their floor right now, where, hey, if you have him, like he's not the worst asset to have by any stretch of the imagination. Obviously ceiling, if they decide to roll back with him as their true number 2, much, much higher. So we got Mahomes, Allen, Herbert, but you said it, this tier is loaded. Joe Burrow versus Lamar Jackson versus Kyler Murray was something I really struggle with in these rankings. Ultimately did settle on that exact order: Burrow, Lamar, Kyler. But man, I feel like over the years in redraft particularly, maybe I've been burning myself, just valuing that rushing floor a little too much. We all know how important it is, having these multiple means of racking up production. But someone like Tom Brady obviously didn't need to run the ball to still put up these massive fantasy seasons over the past 2 years. Have you seen enough from Joe Burrow as a pure passer to think that he can overcome the rushing upside that Lamar or Kyler presents? And accordingly, are you going with Burrow QB4?
I'm not going Burrow QB4 just yet, and I'll tell you why. So check this out. I think this is kind of unbelievable. I think it would shock a lot of people. So Joe Burrow has finished 4 weeks as a better than 8th in fantasy points in his career. In his career, he has 4 weekly finishes better than 8th. So I think there is a ton of recency bias baked into him right now based on seeing him throughout the playoffs. And seeing those 2 games against Baltimore for, in the middle and the end of the season, that those were his 2 biggest games. There's a third in there, like
Chiefs one thrown in there too.
The Chiefs game, exactly right. So he had 3 huge games. 2 of them were against that Baltimore team that had like no defenders. And then he goes into the playoffs, and again they kept winning games, but not with Joe Burrow throwing touchdowns. Right, his fantasy point totals not so hot. He had 1 passing touchdown the Raiders. He had 2. None against the Titans, 2 against the Chiefs, and none in the Super Bowl. So, I guess he had the T. Higgins one, but yeah, he had the T. Higgins one in the Super Bowl.
Joe Mixon has many touchdown passes in the Super Bowl.
100%. So, he came out early in the season and was throwing touchdowns, but there wasn't a lot of volume, and the fantasy production wasn't there. And then the touchdowns really kind of dropped off. In fact, I was on the under 1.5 passing touchdowns in the Super Bowl because we were getting like plus 155, something like that. I couldn't believe that line. And sure enough, he fell under. I mean, the passing touchdowns just weren't there for him, with few exceptions in the second half of the season. So, again, he doesn't add a lot with his legs. I think he can do a little more there as he gets closer to full health, but he's a pocket quarterback. He's going to rely on the pass catchers. And as someone like, I think maybe a comparable guys like Phillip Rivers, right, where tremendous quarterback during his prime, right, one of the best in the league. And Joe Burrow very well could be that as well. But Denver was really a standout in fantasy because, he had a couple of years there he bounced around, but generally had a hard time cracking.
Never had a 30-point game. Never.
Right, because he didn't run, right? He didn't run at all. So, maybe if Burrow picks it up and gets to 250, 300, and maybe a couple rushing touchdowns, that helps. But when you're comparing him to guys like Lamar Jackson and Kyler Murray, who, by the way, are younger. Kyler's younger. Jackson and Burrow are the same age. They've done it before. They run a lot. That for me made the difference. So I'm going Kyler, then Jackson, then Burrow.
The one thing that could save Burrow is if he gets because you're right, the run game volume, okay, he can run around, but he's a pocket quarterback. We all realize that.
Yes.
If he can get the passing volume back up there, because like, for example, I missed on, Tyler Boyd wasn't terrible last year, but I just thought he was going to be a great value based on what he'd done before. And the kind of thing that I didn't see coming in 2021 was the Bengals until the end of the season, man, being this, really run first offense. Like right before they got to that, second Ravens game, the Chiefs game, we had that ridiculous Denver game where they, it was like 10 of 11 first downs in the second half was a handoff to Joe Mixon. My coworker, Eric Eager, always says easiest way to take the wind out of Paul Brown Stadium, get the ball to Joe Mixon on 1st and 10. Nothing against Joe Mixon as a rusher. He was very good, I think, behind a bad offensive line. We don't really give him the same benefit of the doubt as we do with Burrow playing behind them, but certainly would like to see Zach Taylor put the offense more in control of Burrow from week 1 throughout the rest of the year. Hopefully they get that going. We'll give a special shout out to our friends over at All 22, recording this on February, 22nd, 2/22. And guess what the year is? 2022. I mean, that's just a great day to unveil your plan. I mean, when your name is company is All 22, why wouldn't you come out on the day with the most twos that we've ever seen? But anyway, people, truly, our friends at All 22 are unveiling the newest fantasy football game that hundreds of PFF employees, including myself, have already been playing. All 22 uses weekly PFF grades as one of its main scoring components and tests your ability to build a full 53-man roster, offensive line included. Now, you listeners know how much I despise kickers. I don't despise defense. I don't despise offensive linemen. Those are real football players. Back in the day, people, this might shock you, I even played some football myself, and Lord knows I wasn't coordinated enough and I did not have good enough hands to actually play something that us fantasy footballers know. But hey, linebackers, defensive linemen, like offensive linemen, I can work with this, and the folks at All 22 help us make that happen. So if you've ever dreamt of sitting in an NFL front office, if you enjoy the scouting process, you're going to want to check out All 22. Join the waitlist on all-22.com with nothing more than your email. If you join the waitlist before the NFL draft, you'll receive a special promo code for your All 22 subscription. Waitlist users will even gain access to premium content like inaugural draft guides, in-season strategies, feature release announcements, and more. Be sure to follow all22_PFF on Twitter. And truly, people, All 22, less fantasy, more football. It's still fantasy, real life. We're merging them. It's a great day to be great. Great day to sign up for All 22. Again, be sure to follow all22_PFF on Twitter. Also, I would be remiss if I did not give a special shout out to our friends over there at Western and Southern, because the Fantasy Podcast is sponsored by Western Southern Financial Group. While you focus on your roster moves, Western and Southern helps advance your money moves, buying your first house, planning to start a family, wondering how to make your money grow. Western and Southern's playbook of life insurance, investment, and retirement solutions helps you rest assured on game day. Team up to understand needs and address goals with the game plan built just for you. Get started at westernsouthern.com/PFF. And hey, maybe you're a hoop fan. I'm rooting for my Cleveland Cavaliers. Didn't have a chance to watch the All-Star game festivities. I've been watching Ted Lasso, which is an interesting TV show, but that's not the point of this advertisement, because hoop fans, the latest offer from DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA, is too good to pass up. I'm talking between the legs, 360 windmill good. Not exactly what was going on at the dunk contest, but we did see, what was it? The old NFL, not NFL, obviously, the old NBA, wasn't 2K. You guys saw the viral dunk videos of like LeBron, like legit doing a 360 windmill between the legs. Haven't seen that in real life in a while. But anyway, new customers can bet just $1 on any team and get $150 in free bets if they win. It's that simple. Sportsbook isn't available in your state yet. You can still take a shot at a big payday. Everyone can play for huge cash prizes with DraftKings Daily Fantasy Basketball Contest. DraftKings is giving all new customers a free shot at millions of dollars in total prizes with their first deposit. So download DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code PFF. Bet just $1 on any NBA team. Get $150 in free bets if they win. That's promo code PFF at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Just make sure you're 21 years or older. Minimum age and location requirements vary by jurisdiction. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for a full list of requirements and state-specific responsible gaming resources. If you have a gambling problem, don't call me. Call 1-800-GAMBLER. And finally, everyone, you can get 25% off any PFF subscription if you just use code FANTASY. Dynasty ranks, they're up there. Locked article content, they're up there. Draft guide, free agent rankings, completely unlocked mock draft simulator, all that and so much more. Again, support the pod, use promo code FANTASY, get that 25% off any PFF sub. And now back to the podcast. Kyler versus Lamar is interesting because I have Lamar ahead of Kyler right now, but I'm almost thinking about changing him, Mike, because I was looking at rushing quarterbacks and how their career progresses really since 2000. I had a nice sample size of 19 quarterbacks. I guess, all sample sizes are small in the NFL, but we'll take what we can get with that. And basically, as we might expect, over time, we do see rushing quarterbacks run the ball less as they, become better pocket passers. They have millions of reasons to maybe keep themselves a little bit healthier, stay away from some of those hits. And the one guys I saw, though, like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, over 50% of their year one fantasy points were coming from rushing production. Now, obviously, Josh Allen, back-to-back QB1, was able to, he still run the ball a lot, but when he progressed as a sort of passer that he has, then you don't necessarily need to keep running the ball like that. And Lamar, I'm not going to sit here and slander the guy and call him a running back. I hate that more than any other storyline going on fantasy football Twitter. But let's face it, I think pick a passing metric, any passing metric, at least from last year, man, Kyler Murray is the better passer than Lamar Jackson right now. And if there is, if we are going to bet on Kyler versus Lamar as a thrower and kind of looking at their rushing upside and just kind of more or less calling that a draw, I do think Kyler probably deserves to get that nod.
Yeah, I'm with you. And by the way, I will point out, I think it's very hard to find a sample of, run first quarterbacks, right? It's kind of a new generation of quarterbacks. But, I think about someone like Cam Newton, who's kind of a modern era quarterback who kind of took a beating. He ran a lot between the tackles. It was getting to 110, 120, 130 carries. And, you'll look at his peak seasons, right? And they were at age 26 and 28, right? So, even without great passing efficiency, this is a guy that was putting up top 2 fantasy scoring seasons, at ages older than what these guys are right now. So that makes me feel a little bit better about Kyler and Jackson, at least in the next 3 to 4 year window. If they were 2 years older, I'd have them lower, but that's kind of common sense, but especially because they're running quarterback. So I do think Kyler and Jackson is tough. The one thing I'd say about Lamar is, and actually this might apply to Kyler too, but he does only have the one top 10 season, because he was injury plagued this past year. The year before he missed a game and was 10th. The year before was this huge season. So that did give me a little pause there, but at his age, with his profile, what he can do with his legs, I ended up, I went Murray over him. It was a close call, but ended up keeping Lamar in the top 5 there.
And you named one of the 2 quarterbacks out of that 19-player group that we did see, even late in their career, still running the ball a lot. And it was Cam and Cordell Stewart / blast from the past right there. I think pretty clear that at least, Cam post-shoulder injury, like he just wasn't the same passer. Cordell Stewart really never was the most polished passer to begin with. So I do think, if you are able to find that team to invest in you, they can keep running. It's not like, Lamar Jackson's going to be slow by the time he's 30 by any stretch of the imagination. Certainly something to keep an eye on, though. And yeah, man, it has been a while since we've seen Lamar completely take over. I think he was about to get there this year. Unfortunately, that injury bug came to get him. I do want to say, though, great research from Dr. Evan Porter. So I always shout out. He does fantastic work over at Fantasy Points. There isn't any sort of real evidence that mobile quarterbacks are more quote unquote injury prone than statues in the pocket, which makes sense to me, man. Cause all right, yeah, if you're Cam Newton battering around between the tackles, that's not great. But guys like Lamar and Kyler, you don't see them taking these big hits. Like, give me someone that might be the best athlete on the field versus this guy in the pocket that's just going to get teed off on by pass rushers and not really able to move. So something to keep in mind there. I think more so, and when any player, mobile, pocket, quarterback alike, progresses in age, we're going to see them get injured a little bit more often. Russell Wilson now. Mentioned him a little earlier, but 33 years old. We got the trade rumors swirling. Can't go a day without seeing a different Photoshop of him on the old Twitter sphere. Now, his last 16 games haven't been fabulous, but again, we're not talking 2014 Peyton, 2019 Drew Brees. Doesn't seem like his physical ability has really fallen off a cliff by any stretch. So do you believe we've already seen the best of Russ, or based on the age, based on maybe the recency bias, is he maybe a prime buy low candidate in Dynasty Land?
Yeah, I think he's a guy you can go after if you have some quarterback issues. He actually, his numbers weren't bad this past year. His completion percentage down a little bit, but in terms of yards per attempt, yards per completion, touchdown rate, you can go on and on. It was up. He was second in average depth to target, average depth to throw from the quarterback perspective. So that's good. He's pushing it downfield. We had explosive plays. If there's a reservation, it's the lack of rushing. His scrambling was down, his overall rushing production was down. That worries me a little bit. And because that's down and he's in his mid-30s, I am a little worried that we have seen his peak. And honestly, that's probably okay. Are we going to get another QB, number 1 overall scoring quarterback season out of him like we got in 2017 when he led the NFL in passing touchdowns and dropbacks, was second in carries and yards at quarterback? Probably not. We're probably past that. But can he put together, say, 3 or 4 more seasons of, QB7, QB4, QB8, QB9, that kind of thing? Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's possible. Super talented. And if he stays in Seattle, he obviously is Metcalf and Lockett there, and I'm sure they're not done. Hopefully D. Eskridge turns into something here in year number 2. So again, ceiling lower than it's been in the years past because he's not rushing and he's getting older, but I do still think he's a fringe QB1.
4 straight years with, I mean, under 20% of his fantasy production coming from rushing on the ground. I mean, you look at what he was doing early in his career, man. Maybe if, people have just been more NFL fantasy fans last 5 years, probably don't remember that Russ truly one of the more productive dual threat quarterbacks in the game. Maybe doesn't get that, quite those same heights, but got to remember, even if you're not the overall QB1, can certainly still be an awfully great fantasy asset. Now, Mike, always a tough topic because we don't know exactly what's going on, but we know he's a great player on the field. Deshaun Watson situation seems like it'll result in some sort of suspension, but I don't know. I don't want to get into the logistics with it, but let's just say by this time next year, the situation's over. Deshaun Watson has served whatever penalty he needs to serve. And now we're going to 2023 with him being a starting quarterback in the NFL with no more legal concerns. Where would you rank him then? Because personally, man, I think QB4, QB5 is fair because we've seen the dual threat goodness, but to kind of our point, what we've been talking about, maybe the rushing can really help you out early on in the career, but you got to start wondering 26, 28, what's happening. I mean, Watson, you look at what he did in 2020 as a passer, and it's hard to call him anything but a top 5 quarterback in the league. So if all the legal stuff is figured out by 2023, where are you ranking Watson in Dynasty?
Yeah. So you mentioned the last time we saw him, he led the NFL in passing yards, was first in yards per attempt. The passing was tremendous, 33 touchdowns, 7 picks through the air, and still for the 3rd straight year, top 5 in carries. Right. So the guy is, had he not had the legal issues, we'd be talking about him right up there with Allen and Mahomes. Maybe he'd be number 1. Who knows what he did this last season? We don't know, but nonetheless, he would be in there. Straight up, again, if you said he was his old self and we're just focusing on field and he's playing, he has a team, it's not a horrendous supporting cast, I'd probably have him 4. I probably would have him 4 now. I have him 7 right now. I have him behind Murray, nice. Jackson, and Burrow because there's question marks, but I do have him ahead of Dak and the second-year quarterbacks we talked about. So I hedged a little bit, but I think at 26 years old, he'll be 26 when they open the season in September. I think that's where he belongs.
Same page, man. I got him QB4 as well if this plays out, and we will see what happens, obviously. Now, how about Matthew Stafford versus Aaron Rodgers? Because now we're talking about guys certainly later in their careers. Rodgers, I would like to think he's not going to retire playing his best ball. AJ Hawk on the Pat McAfee show, obviously, he's the reason why Rodgers is on there with their friendship and everything. And Hawk kind of last year and this year has been consistently saying that he just doesn't believe Rodgers will retire while he is this damn good at football. With that said, clearly Rodgers is, thinking about it year to year. And we know maybe we're getting a better fantasy asset than Stafford, but how much longer? So like Stafford versus Rodgers, who would you pick first in a startup dynasty draft?
Yeah, so as of right now, with all the information we have, I would lean towards Stafford. I have them 2 spots ahead. I have Stafford, Wilson, and Rodgers right in the early teens. But again, I'm hedging because I don't know if Rodgers is going to play or not. Now, if Rodgers does announce he's coming back, to answer your question, I'd probably bump him up in a spot or 2. I'd take him over Russ. Stafford, man,
they're right next to each other, man.
You pick good names. You pick good names. And Rodgers also outscored Stafford this season by 3 points. Right? They were both pretty good. Top 7, top 6 fantasy quarterbacks. So I think I would feel a little bit more comfortable with Stafford over the next few years. But if I was just looking to win this season and I knew Rodgers was back, I would want Aaron Rodgers.
Stafford, people never gave him enough credit for what he did in the first 8 games of 2019. I mean, he was a legit MVP candidate. I think he was QB4 in fantasy land. Yeah, I know 2020 happened there. We can't just, pick the top 8 games of a guy's career. But with no Kenny Golladay, like Marvin Jones and Danny Amendola were his top receivers, Matthew Stafford has had a bit longer, I think, of a high-end fantasy success than people give him credit for. So yeah, I am with you. Stafford 1 spot ahead of Aaron Rodgers. We'll see if Aaron ever decides to give us a clue on what's happening next. I'm Mike. Whenever I do my ranks, when I'm done with it, I just like to go next to it and put the ADP next to them, see the difference. And, hey, these are guys I'm much higher on than average draft position. These are guys I'm much lower on. Do I really feel that way? And the biggest difference I had after putting these together was Jalen Hurts. He's my QB16, but I'm seeing him with the top 10 ADP, man. I get it for 2022. We've talked about the cheat code that is the dual threat quarterback. I don't need to be sold on that. Are we really convinced Hurts is the Eagles QB of the future though, man? Because we know Nick Sirianni came there last year and stayed with Hurts, but we also did see him completely change this offense after 7 weeks when it became pretty clear that Hurts wasn't able to accomplish what Sirianni was hoping for from this passing game.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm worried. I grew up in Pennsylvania, grew up an Eagles fan, and the schedule was very easy for them in the second half on top of everything else. So, Hurts wasn't getting the job done. They were losing. They switched to a run heavy approach against an easy schedule, and it worked for them the rest of the way. Right. So I'm concerned that they go into next season and the pressure's back on and they're not able to necessarily run the football, as was the case in the playoffs, and it's on Hurts' shoulders. And he doesn't do it. He struggles as he did this past season at times, and the wheels kind of fall off for the Eagles. So I think that's a very real possibility. I hope that's not the case. Certainly you're rooting for the guys, second round pick. You hope he makes the leap and turns into a star. But, I'm with you with those concerns. And I had those concerns last year. I tried to take advantage of hum at near peak value because honestly, his ADP is not too different than it was last year in Dynasty. People were on him. In fact, I was in a league with, you mentioned, Roto World before. The NBC Edge guys, we've had a long ongoing Dynasty league, and someone in the league was on the clock right around the 1-2 turn. I think it was like pick 2.1, something like that. And I offered him Jalen Hurts for that pick, and I took Trevor Lawrence, needing a young quarterback. So I picked Lawrence over Hurts at that point, and I still have them ranked as such. So I still would lean toward those young guys. I think that we need to hedge on this a little bit. Maybe hedge isn't the right word, but you have to weigh next year, obviously larger than you would any other year. So if you do, we all believe Hurts will be the quarterback next season. And if that's the case, he's going to be a top 5, top 7 quarterback every single week for the next season. And that absolutely holds value, even if you think he has 1 or 2 years left as a starter. And honestly, if he struggles and they move on from him next season, he might get another job starting somewhere else for another year or two. And if that's the case, he's still going to put up fantasy points because of his legs. So again, QB12 for me, I guess I'm just a pinch higher than you, but the concerns are real. And if you're banking on him in Dynasty, you definitely need to consider a fallback option, even if it's drafting someone this year, with it maybe a mid second round or late second round, you take a Kenny Pickett or one of these young guys that's drafted in the first round. But you definitely need to have a backup plan there.
It's funny you bring up Lawrence. That was the exact quarterback that when I was looking at some of the ADP, I was like, hold on. Hurts is actually going before Lawrence here. And I went on handy dandy Twitter and just asked my faithful followers, who would you rather have in Dynasty? Got a good 4,000 votes, 65% Trevor Lawrence, 34% Jalen Hurts. So good job, guys. Think you guys are, a little sharper than the average Joe out there, but yeah, man, give me Lawrence over Hurts in the 100%. Future. Hurts is the more fantasy friendly quarterback. You got to be on the field, to be actually putting up those fantasy points. Bold take from myself there. I know. Couple more questions, Mike. Great stuff. Kirk Cousins, Ryan Tannehill, Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo, and Matt Ryan. They're all 30 plus. These aren't guys that, you're breaking your back to get. If you're in a single quarterback league, there's a good chance that none of these guys are even going to be starting week to week. But super flex, obviously, this is when we're kind of diving into this tier. Again, Cousins, Tannehill, Carr, Jimmy G, and Matt Ryan. Pick your buy and sell from this group because we have seen flashes of success from all these guys. That's one point or another, albeit maybe some a little bit longer ago than others.
Yeah, can I do sell for all four? Look, the thing is, we're talking backups, right? Your plan isn't necessarily to build your team around, starting any of these guys on a week-to-week basis. So, look, Cousins flashed this past year. He has Kevin O'Connell there, assuming he stays in Minnesota. You have Jefferson and Thielen and Osborne came around. You're going to get Irv Smith back. You have Dalvin Cook and Madison. I'm sure they'll invest a little bit more on the offensive line. They have a lot of pedigree there, but it hasn't turned into effective play just yet. But that's a situation where he can put together another top 12, maybe top 10 season, but his ceiling is capped. He puts up some big touchdown totals the past couple of years and just couldn't crack that top 5 or really be a difference making QB1, right? And that's the case for all these guys, right? They just have a ceiling in that fringe QB1 territory. We've seen Tannehill in that vicinity and is super run heavy Tennessee. Derek Carr has never been up there. He's always capped out at right around the top 10 or 12. And Garoppolo, same kind of thing, right? He has his moments where he flashes for a little bit, but misses time with injuries or disappears. It doesn't throw any passing touchdowns for a while. He's going to have a new home this year. So don't really love any of these guys. If I had a good QB1 and I wanted a backup, Probably Cousins the safest. I would say Carr maybe with Josh McDaniels and better targets, because you have to imagine they're going to invest there. They're the situation just to get that team to the playoffs with the guys he was throwing to, especially with Waller out this year. Impressive. And I like Derek Carr. He may have me blocked on Twitter, but I do like him.
Big same.
Yeah. But I do think he's an underrated player. So I'm rooting for him. But from a fantasy perspective, he's just one of them guys. He doesn't run it all, and that crushes him.
And I really love the way, Carr, I mean, my God, just some of the things he had to go through this year with Gruden and Henry Ruggs, and just being the leader that he was, throughout the whole process. I think his quote was, I hated the decision, but like, I love the man or something. And I thought that was very relatable. Good to see from Derek Carr. I saw, PFF, I think, just trying to get some engagement on social media and all that, but they were saying like, what happens if Derek Carr goes to Pittsburgh or something like that? Mm-hmm. I do think out of this group, Cousins and Carr are the ones where most likely maybe have a Stafford-esque, revival where they could go to another team and put up some numbers, because Matt Ryan, Tannehill, Jimmy G, I just don't think that we're going to, I think I'm more confident we've already seen the best from them as opposed to Carr and Cousins. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And have we, I haven't looked this up, but have we ever seen Carr with like a really good supporting cast? In terms of targets,
had Cooper and Crabtree, but that's not amazing,
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. That was a pretty good group. But he wasn't playing his best ball back then either. It took him a couple years to get going.
After that, he's injury, yeah.
Right, and I get Hunter Renfrow is pretty good, but not a vertical difference maker. And obviously Waller, when he's healthy, is really good. But and he was he was doing really well earlier in the season when he had that vertical threat, right? So. I'm with you. I think Carr is probably the most likely to come out of nowhere and have that huge season if in the right situation. But I think also on the other hand, he's been around a long time, and he's had several good years where he's played well the past couple of years and hasn't been there in fantasy. And again, he just doesn't run. We keep coming back to that. It's remember a couple of years ago, it was like, oh, this guy is going to run 100 times, so we have to upgrade him. He's one of them, unicorns. But now it's the opposite. The unicorns are the guys that don't run at all, and you have to crush them for. A guy like Baker Mayfield is a guy I've never liked for the same reasons. There's just whether you like it or not, those guys that don't do anything with their legs, they have to be Tom Brady. They have to be Tom Brady to overcome it and throw 45 touchdowns. It's just like you have to do that.
Speaking of Baker Mayfield, it's gross. He has an ADP as QB27. I have him, I think, ranked QB22, which is being kind. I'm not a big fan of what he's done, but I do recognize, Mike, in the second half of 2018, he was able to work as a low-end QB1 after kind of getting the starting job over Tyrod. And then in 2020, now I hated the idea that the Browns were better off without OBJ, but Baker Mayfield did put a good 10, 11 games on tape and in Fantasyland where, again, he wasn't being spectacular. I'm not saying anyone should be lining up to start Baker Mayfield, but I think you could do worse as you're like QB3 and Superflex than someone that has at least shown us the ability to be a high-end quarterback, not once, but twice during the course of his short career. And let's give the guy a little bit of slack. I mean, you tear your labrum week 2. He was looking pretty damn good in week 1 against the Chiefs, and up until that injury, obviously, had a laundry list of things going on. I'm sure the guys at NBC Sports Edge use the, Baker Mayfield parentheses, everything, not practicing today, a time or two. So, we talked earlier about, value and all that. Is Baker Mayfield someone that maybe we're writing off just a little bit too quickly because, someone like, I guess I'm more confident. You said before, like maybe Jalen Hurts could get a shot on another team, which, yeah, absolutely. I'm not saying that can't happen, but I feel like Baker Mayfield and these former number 1 overall picks, especially when they've, shown off that arm strength, always seems like there might be another offensive coordinator out there thinking they can fix this guy. And again, seeing him dirt cheap in Dynasty land, I'm okay throwing a dart at Baker Mayfield. Am I just wasting my time, Mike?
Yeah, I think probably because he just doesn't have a ceiling, right? I mean, I don't think he's ever going to be a guy we consider to be an annual top 10 fantasy quarterback. And one of the reasons is his legs, right? And remember, he's going to be 27 this year, right? He's not 23 anymore, right? Came in a little older than some of these guys coming in, and he never runs the ball. He's never had more than 165 rushing yards in a season. He has 5 career rushing touchdowns. He's always going to be a liability in that department in fantasy. And that's why I've never really liked him. I came around on him a few spots in my season long rankings last year toward the end of the season, because there were some reasons to believe that maybe they were going to throw the ball more, because they did open up the offense in the second half of 2020. They moved away from being super run heavy for the first time with Stefanski calling plays, whether it was Minnesota or Cleveland. And there seemed to be an impression that maybe they would carry that over, and they did not. They did not do that. They went back to running the football. Certain, part of that was not maybe having the targets, and part of it was Baker not being fully healthy. And again, look, I'm not sure he's a difference making quarterback. He did finish 2020 strong and then kind of fell off. Maybe he is, maybe he gets healthy and he plays better this season. But even if he does, even if he gets healthy and he plays at a high level and say he's 7th or 8th in QBR or something like that, is that going to be enough to be a weekly QB1? I don't think so, because of his rushing and because of the scheme, with them running the ball so much. I don't think so. So I think if you take him, it is as I waited too long for my QB2 and super flex. I'll take a shot. Maybe he's QB15 for me and I'll be okay. But that's it. Like you said, probably a good QB3 in super flex. But that puts him at his ADP, right? 27, 20, 25, 27. That's about where I have him ranked. So no, I'm not a big Baker fan from a fantasy perspective.
If his best case scenario is a borderline QB1, probably not worth, getting on the ride in the first place. Because, looking at the scheme, looking at the lack of a rushing floor, I know the Stefanski parallel is probably the easiest one to make, but why not if the shoe fits? Kirk Cousins last year, probably, like, we're hoping Baker Mayfield, he could maybe one day be like what Kirk Cousins is, and that's not great. I'm sure Browns fans don't love hearing that, but Kirk, at least in fantasy last year, just a QB 12 in fantasy points per game. So yeah, maybe someone like Jameis or these other quarterbacks we're about to talk about, better investment if you're just shooting for that ceiling. That takes us to last question for you, Mike. Favorite deep sleeper who you think has a chance to rise up to, we'll say, passable QB2 territory, but right now they're just in the dirt. So some possible examples: Daniel Jones, Jameis Winston, Jared Goff, Sam Darnold, Marcus Mariota, or maybe the flavor of today, everyone's talking about him, Mitchell Trubisky, perhaps.
Oh my, it's like peak early offseason.
This is February. Let's go.
But even on social, I get the tweets, I'll tweet something about the Steelers or whatever. And you get, I think I posted their skill position players the other week and included the quarterbacks, right? It's obviously not great, right now what they're looking at. And the replies are like, that's all right, we'll bring in Mitch Trubisky and Nick Foles and be fine, Nick Foles or Mitch Trubisky and be fine. Why? Everyone hated Mitch Trubisky this time last year, right? He's not a good starter. Get rid of him. The Bears need to move on. Now these quarterback needy teams, the fans are like, let's get Mitch Trubisky, right? Like, he's the solution. Or Nick Foles, it's ridiculous. Mason Rudolph cannot be your plan at quarterback. You can't. Kyle Trask probably can't be your plan. Mitch Trubisky can't be your plan. Like, if you go into the season
super bad,
year,
man, like Trubisky, Foles, why is it between McLovin and Muhammad here? Like, we got to have a better option out there,
right? And you see the quotes like them saying, well, Mason Rudolph is our top quarterback right now. Yeah, well, Kyle Trask is the Bucs quarterback right now. They don't have anyone else on the roster. Like, that's their situation. Sure, that doesn't mean they're not going to address it. So it can't be the plan. If the Steelers go into next season and they're just content with Mason Rudolph, they're going to either barely miss the playoff, or they're going to miss the playoffs completely, or get knocked out in the first round, whatever it may be. He's not the answer. We've seen him already. So you have to anticipate those teams being aggressive. Hopefully they are, if they want to win football games. But to answer your question, the guy I have ranked highest that kind of fits this bill is someone you mentioned, and that would be Daniel Jones. I have him QB 18, still 25 years old, finally got better management there in New York. Most likely a better coaching situation. I've known Mike Kafka for quite a few years. I think that was a strong hire by them, and he can help develop Daniel Jones. But, again, Jones doesn't need to be an elite passing quarterback to be a QB1. He needs to be average, okay? Because what's killed him the past couple of years is the Giants can't score touchdowns. They're dead last in touchdowns the past couple of years. And maybe Jones is part of that. He certainly is a big part of it. But maybe with a better scheme and healthy players around him, he can at least be okay in that department, because, again, he can run. He can add value with his legs. He is a good athlete. We've seen that before. He puts up numbers when he's healthy, and he's still in his prime years. So I think Jones is the guy from that group with the better coaching, the better supporting cast, the better scheme, that he can make that leap and at least be a fringe QB1. But I say all that knowing that we felt that way the last couple of years, and it hasn't panned out with him. So go tread cautiously with Daniel Jones.
We have seen that ceiling though. And I know,
Right.
Godfather of our industry, Matthew Berry, certainly, caught a lot of shit where people, it's always after the fact, man. I'm sure no one had too much of a problem when he was saying Daniel Jones was his late round sleeper going 2020. Once the season's over, people come out of their shells. But Daniel Jones, as a rookie in 2019, 4 weeks as a top 2 fantasy quarterback. And even looking at last year, man, weeks 1 through 4, QB 12, QB 4, QB 24, and QB 7. Then he gets I believe it was a concussion against the Cowboys, just wasn't the same. He gets banged up at the end of the year. This rushing upside, that's what we're looking for. Daniel Jones has it, man. Every time I see him, break free on a read option, I feel like Next Gen Stats is telling me he's the fastest kid alive and all this going on. The guy can run. Maybe we didn't expect that, coming out of college, but hey, man, 3 years of evidence. I like the Daniel Jones call. Mike, great stuff as always. Thank you for the time, brother. Again, not your second appearance on the PFF Fantasy Podcast, more like your 2000th appearance. And we appreciate you each and every time. Anything else you want to get off your chest before you get out of here?
No, I mean, we covered pretty much all layers here, right? Of the rankings. Actually just updated mine not too long ago, but we know things are going to change throughout the offseason. So a good starting point here. We have to start somewhere. I'm working on rookies now. We'll get them into the rank soon. And projection season is upon us, at least to get that first run going before free agency, and that's going to change things as well. So and by the way, it's coming fast. I mean, there was an extra week in the regular season, which means there's one less week in the off season, so everything's coming faster. We have to pack a full off season in one less week, which sounds like it's easy enough, but it's really not, because there's so much to do. So we're just checking boxes over here at ESPN and getting stuff ready to go for next season. We have some new features in the game, including better dynasty and keeper support too, which is awesome. So I've been pushing for that for a long time. I'm excited, and nothing better, my friend, than a dynasty league. So it's always fun to come on here and talk some dynasty.
Yeah, man. So just February, we got a lot of time to talk free agencies and rookies still, but let's take a step back and try to look at the league from a bigger picture. I believe we accomplished that in style today with the quarterback position. When are you going to start having the clay projections going out for free agency, perhaps?
Yeah, I'll have the first, kind of a loose run of projections ready to go going into free agency. Okay. So I could drop kind of live projections, an early look, just to give everyone a ballpark of where guys belong. And then after that, after free agency settles, that's when I take a long time, like a full week, and go team by team, player by player. I write my article, things I learned, and really tune them. And then we'll have that PDF out with a really, really in-depth look at the projections for the whole league. So I'm excited for that. I always like to get to that point. That for me makes it feel like the season's up and running.
Locking yourself in the office, beard getting out of control. Gotta get those projections just right. Truly, I mean, every time there's a big offseason move, one of the first things I'm looking at are Mike Clay's newfound projections. Some of, I think, the best volume of projections out there in the industry. Check out Mike, Field, Matthew Berry, the whole ESPN crew. Again, Mike Clay on Twitter at Mike Clay NFL, as you guys already know. So for Mike, I'm Ian. Thank you as always for tuning in to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. And until next time, take care, everybody.